Welcome. In this lecture of NCERT, we will talk about an interesting concept, federalism. Now, when we talk about federalism, we understand it in a very simple terms that a federal structure which comprises the center and the state. Now, this concept is not only unique to India but has been applied in various countries across the world. To begin with, if we compare the political map of 1947 versus the map of 2020 or 2010, we would understand how the boundaries have changed, and this change in the boundary in itself is a marker indicating that there has been a lot of developments. There have been new states that have been formed, the existing boundaries have been changed. There have been the names which have been changed. For example, Mysore has become Karnataka, Madras presidency became Tamil Nadu, and so on and so forth. Now, coming on to the most interesting aspect of federalism. Now, what is federalism? If we talk in terms in India, we say there are 20 major languages, more than hundreds of minor languages, numerous religions and millions of indigenous people. Now, to have them all on a common platform, we need to have a body that would govern or that would make sure that everyone receives their rights to the fullest at the local level, at the state level, as well as at the center level. So there are two sets of polities that are involved. One which is at the local or the state regional level, the other is at a global level. Now, in very simple terms, if I say, if the ruling party at the center, let's say, is ABC and at the state also is ABC, then the center would provide adequate funding to the state. But let's say at the center the party is ABC, at the state the party is XYZ. Probably this center won't provide adequate fund to the state, and therefore there can be limits to the growth and the development in that region. Also, when we are talking about federalism, there are two sets of identities and loyalties. Again, these identities and loyalties are at both levels. One is at the regional level or the state level, and the other one at the national level. When we say identity, what does it mean? It could be ethnic identity, it could be religious identity, it could be caste-based, creed-based, and so on and so forth. And loyalty could be towards party A or party B. Also, when we talk about a written constitution, the written constitution is supreme, and this constitution governs the sources of powers and establishes the powers for both the center and the state. But it also explains that there would be certain powers which would be only with the center, there would be certain powers which would be only with the state. However, there would be certain subjects which would be matter of both state and center. For example, education in India. Now, education in India comes under a concurrent list. That means both the center as well as the state would take care of it. Also, if in any case there is a dispute between the center and the state, or state and state, or what we call as interstate, then there should be a body which could give a decision whether party A is correct or party B is correct in case of a dispute. Now, this party, I am not saying a political party, but any two parties involved in the conflict. So here again, what is important is the role of an independent judiciary. When we talk about, let's say, scenarios where we have been studying federalism, India definitely has a federalism, but where does this idea originate from? The study is very interesting. The main concern here is when United States, the Soviet Union, that's the USSR, was one, right? Now this Soviet Union, the USSR, was one of the supreme powers till 1989. At that point, there was a breaking point and it decentralized and fragmented into different nations. Why? The major reason was extreme centralization of powers. Now, this extreme centralization of power led to dissolution and finally breaking up of the whole entity into separate nations. The similar concept was witnessed in Czechoslovakia, in Yugoslavia, in Pakistan, and numerous other countries. For example, Canada, again, the English-speaking, French-speaking regions were segregated. There have been various attempts to understand the federalism. Now, when we talk about federal polity, or the federalism, when we talk about federalism in American terms, it's basically extremely different from what it is in German federalism or in Indian federalism or in Italian federalism. So each nation have certain unique characteristics. Now in this lecture our focus would be extensively to study Indian federalism per se, but we would be understanding some backdrop information about two important countries, Nigeria and West Indies, and how federalism grew, dissolved and again grew in those regions. Also, there are few factors that affect federalism. One is culture, the next is ideology, the next is politics, the next is history. So these are some of the major aspects that actually influence federalism not only in India but across the globe. Also, when we are talking about few important case studies, let's first talk about West Indies. Now, West Indies was colonized by British, similar to India, but in 1958, the Federation of West Indies came into existence. The government was extremely weak, and this weak central government could not stand for a longer, and there was extreme competition and dissolution in 1962. However, with the Treaty of Examrace in 1973, there was a joint authority to establish West Indies again under one umbrella, and this was the Caribbean counties. Now this Caribbean community focused on a common currency, a common economy, a common market, a common executive and head of the government, and therefore now West Indies has a sound federalism structure. Next coming on is the case study of Nigeria. Now in Nigeria till 1914 we had the North and the South Nigeria, and these were two separate British colonies. However, at Abadan Constitutional Conference in 1950, the Nigerian leaders thought about forming a common federal constitution. So there were three ethnic groups: Yoruba, Igbo and Hausa Fulani. These three were in the west, east and the north of Nigeria. Now bringing these communities together was involved with lot of fear and conflict. Now to avoid that, there was a military regime that came into existence, and in 1960 the constitution was laid down in Nigeria. However, a military supervised constitution came in 1979. No state was allowed, and finally there was the restoration of democracy in 1999 in Nigeria, and different religious conflicts came to an end with a democratic system that started in Nigeria. Now, this whole study helps us to understand why we need to study federalism in Indian context. Now, as I said, there would be division of powers between state and center. So that's the very first thing that we need to understand. But this comes with certain issues. There are regional diversities, there are linguistic diversities, there are recognition issues. However, there have been cases where if we talk about the history, there was agitation of Muslim League, and that focused on the representation of Muslims. However, a large region or a large power discussed this issue, and later on there were negotiations after partition. Their decision went to the Constituent Assembly, the framers of the Indian Constitution, and finally, based on the principle of unity and cooperation, the states and separate powers of the states were recognized. Now, under Article 1 of the Constitution 1950, India as Bharat shall be a union of states. So, India as Bharat shall be the union of states. That was the first thing that was said. The second thing was the state and the territories of the state would be the part of part A, B, C of the first schedule, and the last was the territory would comprise of the states, the other territories which have been acquired, and the territories which have been specified in Part D of the Constitution. That means all those territories would become ultimately the part of the Federation of India. Now, as I said, the union list is the list which is governed by the center, state list looked after by the state governments, and concurrent by both the center as well as the state. So under the state we have agriculture, police, trade and commerce, state public services. Under union list, defense energy, atomic energy, foreign affairs, war, banking, railways, post and telegraphs. Under concurrent, education, as we already mentioned, trade unions, adulteration, transfer of properties other than agriculture are some of those. But there are also what are called as residuary powers. They are the powers which are not mentioned either in the union state or the concurrent list, but they still exist. For example, the cyber laws in India, and the union legislature has the power to actually take decisions in certain matters. Now, these division of powers are really important. As I said, there are two sets. One is the union, the other is the state. Now, with these two sets, it's really important to understand how the powers have been demarcated and distributed correctly. There has been a constitutional status and a clear identification of the area of the activity. Let's say if there is a dispute between the center or the state, or state and the state, who would take care about it? Judiciary would take care about it. Constitution also demarcates the boundaries for various states, boundaries for country with other countries, also explains what are the powers, the economic powers, the financial powers, the powers in the hand of the central government, the powers in the hand of the state government. One of the very foremost basis of good federalism is to have a strong central government. Now, when there is a strong central government, it would ensure that the state and the territorial integrity of the state is maintained. Now, India, for example, is a continent, has we could say a huge amount of diversity in terms of religion, language, linguistics, or ethnicity, religion, and therefore to integrate all of them is really important. If there is an emergency situation, who would preside? The center would preside. The decision from the center would be binding. Also, when the center is strong, what happens is the allocation of the financial and economic powers is done justly, that means fairly. And then also, when there is a strong central government, you have a good bureaucracy or administration. All India services, as part of the UPSC appointments, the IAS, IPS officers are part of this chain. And then at the state level, governors have certain power to recommend the dismissal of the state government and the dissolution of the assembly if and when required. Planning Commission, which is appointed by the union government, is the major coordinating agency. Now, Planning Commission is being replaced by Niti Aayog. The major difference between the two is the Planning Commission followed top-down approach. However, Niti Aayog follows a bottom-up approach for development. Also, there have been occasions where central government is legislating on the state list. So, center having a speak on the state list is really important, and if that is approved, that move is passed into the Rajya Sabha for ratification. Article 34 and 33 of the Constitution actually talks about protecting the persons in the service by union and the state with respect to any action taken to maintain law and order. So again, the role of Article 33 and 34 are really important to have a strong central hold. Now, when we talk about conflicts in India's federal system, there are 5 important conflicts. The issue between center-state relation, the demand for continuous autonomy, the role of governor and the president's rule, demand for new states, and interstate conflict. Let's talk about these one by one. So when we talk about center-state relations, as I said in the very beginning, if both the ruling party at the center and the state are the same, there would be a good coordination and a very good relation. So numerous development efforts can be done. However, if at the center and the state, the parties are different, this could actually bring in a constraint in the finances and create issues in development. So center-state relations need to be smooth. So during the 1950s, early 60s, there was the same party, Congress, which ruled in most of the states as well as the center, and this led to good kind of development. However, during the middle 1960s, there was decline in the presence of Congress, and there were numerous state local parties that came into existence, and by 1990s, we could say that the dominance of the Congress started to further decline, and this actually brought in a change in the center-state relations. Now the next is demand for autonomy. Now when we talk about demand for autonomy, it's establishing oneself as a separate unit. So administrative unit, as a separate administrative unit. Now, Hindi speaking in Tamil Nadu, establishing themselves as a separate entity. Development of Punjabi language in Punjab. Some state feel that they want to separate on the basis of language. The other feel they want to separate on the basis of resources they have. For example, Jharkhand, mineral rich state. So there have been various issues based on which there has been demand for autonomy, and this demand for autonomy has a very close tie to demand for new states that we would understand in a while. Also, there is another demand which is a demand for financial autonomy. So in 1977, the left front government in West Bengal brought a document for restructuring the central state relations, and this was under the Sarkaria Commission. Also, there have been various documents and involved with various local parties which have been working for the same. The next is the role of governor and the president's rule. Now, governor is an elected office holder. However, most of the governors are retired military persons, they are civil servants. Besides that, the governor is appointed by the center. So definitely, governor's role can be influenced by the center, or there can be interference by the center for the same. So there has to be a very clear understanding of the center-state relationship. As I mentioned, under the Sarkaria Commission, the report which was brought in 1983, submitted back in 1988, focused on being strictly non-partisan. Non-partisan means actually not being biased towards any political parties. Article 356 talks about the president rule that could be brought in the state, and then we have this being sparsely used in 1967. However, after 1967, this was commonly used in many of the states where the states were non-Congress and the center was in Congress government. Also, we have seen that the central government removed the elected governments of Andhra Pradesh and Jammu and Kashmir in 1980s. So there has been definitely the involvement and interference of center in the state governance. The next is demand for new states. As I said, the demand started with the linguistic issues and the creation of language states. So in 1954, State Reorganization Commission was established, and there were various linguistic groups that were taken into account. In 1960, Gujarat and Maharashtra were the two states that were created. In 1956, Andhra Pradesh was created. In 1966, we had Punjab and Haryana being created, and later on the various northeast states of Meghalaya, Arunachal Pradesh, Manipur which were created. Then in 2010, there were 3 new states formed from Bihar. So from Bihar, it was Jharkhand. From Madhya Pradesh, it was Chhattisgarh, and from Uttar Pradesh, it was Uttarakhand. Also, we still have issues about separating the separation of Telangana from Andhra Pradesh already done, and then we have issues of separating Vidarbha in Maharashtra area. So there has been a constant demand talking about autonomy of the new states and creation of new states. The next important conflict in the federal system arises with the interstate conflicts. Now, interstate conflict, as I said, judiciary takes a key role, be it the matter of interstate or be it the matter of center and state. Judiciary is the one that helps to settle the dispute. Now, these disputes could be related to the border issues. These could be related to the river issues. For example, Kaveri River is still in news, the water being drained whether in Tamil Nadu or in Karnataka. Narda River, again a dispute between Gujarat, Madhya Pradesh and Maharashtra. We have numerous similar disputes between Maharashtra and Karnataka around the city of Belgaum. Manipur and Nagaland, the border dispute has been long standing. So there can be issues which could be either due to border, river or any other phenomena that runs common between the two regions as such. Then we talk about a very special case, which is the special provisions, as the name suggests. Now, the size and the population of different region makes or ensures how the special provisions are brought. Now, when India got independence, either it was the case that most of the Muslim majority states or presidencies sided with Pakistan during that time, but Jammu and Kashmir was one exception. The Maharaja of Jammu and Kashmir, despite the views of the people there, ceded that they would actually merge with India. Now, since this was the case, there was an idea to preserve the integrity of the region, and there was Article 370 that was brought, and that was making the state concurrent with the lawmaking at the union. So any law which is being passed at the union would be brought to Jammu Kashmir, and with the state presidents and the state consent, this would be further brought ahead. Article 371 talks about the powers of the northeast state and the similar powers for alienation which has to be brought in various other areas were taken into account. Now, when Article 370 was brought, some of the interesting things that were part of it is there can be no emergency that can be declared without the consent of the state, even if the union government does so. However, that does not apply to the remaining part of the India. Also, they cannot impose a financial emergency without the consent of the state. So again, this was what was there in the Article 370. DPSPs, the Directive Principles of State Policy, do not apply to the region of Jammu Kashmir, and any amendments to the Indian Constitution can apply only with the concurrence of the government of Jammu Kashmir. So anything which has to be brought from the center must be approved by the state there and then. And that was the basic idea, and the major reason to do this was to give the region more autonomy, because Jammu Kashmir was the region that actually willingly merged with India during that time. So the constitutional provisions were laid in such a way that they were given more constitutional autonomy, and as a result Article 370 was implemented, specifying the separate constitution, a separate flag, and the parliament's powers to make the subjects for the union list being accepted only by the concurrence of the government of Jammu Kashmir at that time. So those are some of the key things and provisions that we need to take under account under special provisions. So in this section, we have focused on federalism, the basic structures of federalism, the 5 issues because of which the conflicts arises when in case of federalism. So stay tuned for more updates on NCERTs from our side. Have a wonderful day ahead.